Hello, my name is Tim Shoebridge. Welcome to this video, which is going to be a short video, a short sort of low budget video, just checking out some patching on the Moog Matriarch. Someone contacted me a few days ago asking me, does the Matriarch respond to keyboard velocity? And if it does, how the hell do you make it respond to keyboard velocity? And that got me thinking, because it's something I hadn't tried before. So this video is going to be showing you how you can experiment with keyboard velocity on the Matriarch. I'm going to show you a few different ways of patching it, but these are really just the sort of starting point for you to do your own experimentation. So that's what's coming up next. I really do hope you enjoy this video. Thanks very, very much for watching. Okay, so before we patch the synthesizer, there's one thing we need to do, and that's look for a specific CV out that's on the back panel of the Matriarch. It's this one here. It's called KB-Vel out. It stands for Keyboard Velocity Out. And I'm just going to whack a little patch cable into it right now, because when I turn the synth round to do the rest of the video, I won't have access to the back panel of the synth. So that's it. KB-Vel out, keyboard velocity out. It's crucial if you want to play around with the keyboard velocity of the synthesizer. Okay, so now we've got our CV for our keyboard velocity. What do we do with it? Where do we put this? Now, as with modular synthesis, there's always more than one way of doing something. I'm going to show you first what I think most people would consider to be the right way of doing it. If you look at a synthesizer that has velocity sensitivity and allows you to control that velocity sensitivity, then you'll find that normally velocity sensitivity is associated with envelope generators. You might find that you've got a separate control for velocity for your amplitude envelope and your filter envelope. And now, the amplitude envelope is the main way of controlling how loud the sound is. It's generating a control voltage which is being applied to the voltage controlled amplifiers. The amplifiers in the Matriarch, there are actually two of them because this is a stereo synthesizer. But basically, obviously internally there are some connections going on and we're not having to use any patch cables, but internally there's a connection from this envelope out, from the amplitude envelope generator here, into the VCA number 1 and VCA number 2 here. It's going on internally, we don't have to do anything, but what we're going to have to do is to do those connections ourselves, and then we'll be able to control the amount of envelope generator that gets passed to the VCAs and attenuate it basically with this cable here. So that's what we're going to do now. So what we need is a cable that comes out of here and goes into these two here. And the easiest way to do that is with one of these splitter cables. So if I put a cable in there and put this into one of them, then I can just basically piggyback from that cable and go into the second. And that's all we need to do. Well, apparently that's all we need to do. But when I play a note, you'll hear that it's louder, it's twice as loud in fact, and that's because the internal connection is still in place. Now with semi-analog synthesizers, when you plug something in, make a connection, generally that will break any internal connection, but it's not doing that with the Matriarch. And the reason why it's not doing it with the Matriarch is because the Matriarch is a bit special with its VCAs. It's got this little switch here called VCA mode, where we can switch between just using the amplitude envelope, or the amplitude and the filter envelopes, or neither of the envelopes and have a sort of a drone effect. And what we need to do in order to break the internal connection of the amplitude envelope going to the VCAs is to switch this to drone. Now we get the normal volume, whereas before we get double. So I know now that the internal connection has been broken. And if I pull out this, we hear nothing now. Right. So now we've got our own connection in place from the amplitude envelope generator to both VCAs. And what we need to do to give it some keyboard velocity is to attenuate this control voltage with this control voltage. And the way to do that is through an attenuator, and thankfully the Matriarch has 3 different attenuators on it for doing different jobs. So the way to do this is very simple. Rather than going direct here, we need to go via an attenuator, and we've got one right here close to us. So I'm going to take this out and put it into the output of the attenuator, and then I'm going to take another cable and go from the envelope to the input of the attenuator. And if we turn the attenuator back up, it's as if nothing's ever happened. Okay, now we need to attenuate this, and we can do this either by manually turning this control or with a CV input, and that's exactly where we put our keyboard velocity CV. Now we've got to get this this potentiometer here in the right place for optimum sort of velocity sensitivity, and I think probably turning it to the off position, the 0 position, is the best place. But let's hear what it does. So this is playing the key normally, and this is playing it softly. It's working. But to my ears, I don't think there's a massive difference between quiet and loud. Now, the reason for that could be many things, but what I do know with synthesizers, certainly synthesizers and workstations that implement keyboard velocity, is that you can go to great lengths to get that velocity sounding sort of natural to you. You know, like you're playing an acoustic piano, for example. You know, many synthesizers implement velocity curves which control the response of you hitting the key, and many synthesizers implement multiple velocity curves for you to choose from and ways to manipulate them. So this Matriarch doesn't have that. It's a basic implementation, so I don't know whether we'll ever really get it to be you know, the same as on a comprehensive workstation keyboard, but it is working. We can play around with this a little bit. Obviously, as I turn it negative, what that's doing is actually reducing this control voltage. So it's making the quiet sounds quieter, but it is actually making the loud quieter as well. It's a sort of a linear response. And as we turn it up, it's making it louder, but it's making even the quiet notes loud as well. So probably in the middle somewhere is about the right place. Maybe we should really amplify this signal. I don't actually know what the control voltage range is on it, but maybe we could amplify it and sort of stretch it out. There's no way for me to do that, I don't think, here on the Matriarch. I'd need to use a bit of Eurorack gear to do that. But it is kind of working. Now, as I said before, the way that most synthesizers implement keyboard velocity is on a per envelope basis. We've got our amplitude envelope, but we've also got a filter envelope. So ideally, we would replicate these cables, use a splitter cable on this, and use another attenuator and do the same thing again for the filter envelope. I'm not going to go through all the rigmarole of doing that, but what I will do, just to sort of like show you the basic effect, is I'm just going to take these out of here, switch drone mode off, and I'm going to put them into the CV inputs that control the cutoff of the filter. And it's a stereo synth in many respects, so we have 2 filters. So I'm going to put them into there and there instead. So no, we're no longer affecting the amplitude envelope at all. We're no longer affecting the VCAs at all. We're using the amplitude envelope to control the cutoff of the filters. And it sounds like this. I'm just turning the cutoff down. So that's pressing it really gently. And that's hard, and you can see how well that's responding. It's a much more pronounced and obvious response than the VCAs were giving me. So that's another way of implementing the velocity sensitivity. I'll just show you just one more way, and it's the simplest to implement in terms of cables, and it's basically, if I can strip all this away, now, you know, there's a signal path all the way from the oscillators into the mixer, from the mixer into the filters, from the filters into the VCAs, from the VCAs into the delay, and from the from the filters downwards, it's a stereo path. There's two of everything, but there's actually just one of everything. When we go from the mixer into the filters here, there is an output from the mixer. It's a mono output. It's a bit of a bugbear for me that they didn't provide a stereo output from the mixer, but never mind. It's a mono output, and that mono output goes into both filters. So it's an audio out into the filters. And we can replicate this, again, using a splitter cable. Let's use this little red one. From the output into the VCF number 1, and also into the VCF number 2. Now in this case, this is an audio signal, it's not a control voltage. And if we break that connection, we get nothing. Because here, when we put something into these inputs here, we are breaking the internal connection that was there before. So we have now got our external connection, and we can attenuate this. So I'm going to go from the output of the attenuator into the filter and the second filter, and then I'm going to go from the output of the mixer into the attenuator, so output of mixer via attenuator to both of the filters, audio, and I'm going to use the keyboard velocity CV in the attenuator like last time. Let's see what that sounds like. So it's working, it is attenuating the overall sort of volume. But again, the difference between the quietest you can hit the keys and the loudest is not massive. There you go, there's 3 different ways of doing the cabling using the keyboard velocity out the back of the Matriarch. Hopefully that gives you some ideas about how you can experiment and come up with your own patches to use in keyboard velocity. That's it, until the next one. Thanks very, very much for watching.